October 1979. A wet Tuesday outside Oakland. A 12-year-old boy stands at the edge of a road in the rain and watches his father fall. Not in a fight. Not in a gunfight. Just a drunk teenager in a blue Buick sliding through a stop sign and a chrome motorcycle going down sideways on wet asphalt. The boy hears the sound before he sees it. A sound like a refrigerator dropped from a roof. Then quiet. Then his father's leather jacket, dark with rain, lying still in the middle of the road. The boy doesn't scream. He doesn't run. He just stands there, 12 years old, hands at his sides, watching the rain bead up on the back of that leather. Now, why didn't that boy grow up to be the angry man you'd think he would? Why did it take him 46 years to walk back into his father's clubhouse? Stay with me, because this story doesn't go where you think it goes. Let me take you back a little. Before the rain. Before the Buick. Before any of it. His name was Michael Doyle. Everybody called him Mikey. He was 12 years old in the fall of 1979, the smallest kid in the 7th grade. Skinny. Quiet. Glasses with thick black frames that were always sliding down his nose. A stack of library books on his nightstand, almost as tall as he was. And his father was Hank Patch Doyle, road captain of the Oakland Charter of the Hells Angels. 6'3", 240 pounds. Beard like Spanish moss. Tattoos up both arms, including one on his right forearm that said Mikey in block letters, right above a little ink drawing of a paperback book. Now you'd think a kid like that, a father like that, there'd be friction. There wasn't. Hank Doyle never raised his hand to that boy. Never raised his voice. The men at the clubhouse used to joke that Patch was twice the man at home that he was on the road, and on the road he was already plenty. The clubhouse sat on a side street off East 14th. A low brick building with a steel door and a hand-painted sign over the entrance. Mikey had been going there since he was 4. After his mother died, a brain aneurysm when he was 9, dropped one Sunday morning making pancakes. The clubhouse was where he went after school. Every day. 3:30 he'd walk in the side door with his book bag, and one of the men would look up from the pool table and say, "Hey, Mikey." He'd say, "Hey, Lobo." "Hey, Smitty." "Hey, Roach." And he'd go to the corner by the jukebox where there was an old green couch with a broken spring, and he'd read. The men were gentle with him. I want you to understand that. These were not gentle men most of the time. Some had done time. Some had bad habits. Some had reputations that would make your hair stand up. But around that boy, they were like uncles at a christening. They'd bring him a Coke without asking. They'd lower the jukebox if the song got too loud. When he had homework, someone would always come over and ask if he needed help with the math, because the math was the one thing he wasn't good at. Smitty, prison tattoos on his neck, glass eye from a bar fight in '68. Smitty was the one who taught Mikey long division. Got down on his knees by that green couch with a yellow legal pad and walked him through it like a school teacher. Believe me, that happened. And his father was the quietest one of all. Hank would come in around 4, after his shift at the body shop he owned with his brother. He'd kiss the top of Mikey's head. He'd say, "How was school, son?" Mikey would say, "Fine." Hank would say, "What were you reading?" Mikey would hold up the book. And Hank would nod, like the book was an old friend. Even when it wasn't. Even when it was a book Hank had never heard of in his life. At night after dinner, Hank would read to him. Now here's the thing. You'd think a man like that, biker, road captain, 6'3", you'd think he'd read his boy gangster stories. He did sometimes. Mickey Spillane. Elmore Leonard. But he also read him Steinbeck. The Red Pony, Of Mice and Men, The Grapes of Wrath, a chapter a night all the way through when Mikey was 11. He'd sit on the edge of the bed, this huge man with huge hands, and he'd hold the book like a baby bird, and he'd read in a slow, careful voice. Sometimes he'd stop and explain a word. Sometimes he'd just say, "You hear that, Mikey?" You hear how he said that? Mikey would nod. And Hank would say, "That's how you say a true thing. Plain. No decoration." There was a sentence Hank said to him. He said it more than once. Mikey never forgot it. He said, "You don't have to be like me, Mikey. You just have to be honest about who you are. That's all I want from you, son. Be honest about who you are." Mikey didn't fully understand what his father meant. He was 12, but he held onto the words. The way you hold onto a key you don't have a lock for yet. The Tuesday it happened, Mikey was supposed to go with his father to the bookstore. There was a little used bookstore on Lakeshore that Hank liked. He'd take Mikey there once a month and tell him to pick out 3 books. Any 3. Mikey had been excited about it all week. He'd been making a list. But that morning Mikey had a math test the next day, and Hank could see he was nervous. At lunch, when Hank came home from the shop on the bike, he sat down at the kitchen table and said, "Mikey, I'm gonna run by the bookstore by myself this afternoon. You stay home and study. I'll pick up some books I think you'll like. We'll go together next week, okay?" Mikey said okay. He didn't argue. He was relieved, if I'm being honest. He didn't want to fail that math test. Hank kissed the top of his head. Hank put on his leather jacket, the one with the patches, the one that said Oakland on the back. Hank said, "I love you, son." And he walked out the door, and Mikey heard the bike start up in the driveway, that big deep rumble, and heard it pull away into the rain. That was the last time Mikey saw his father standing up. A little less than an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Mikey went to answer it. Barefoot, math book in his hand. Standing on the porch was his Uncle Tom. Tom Lobo Doyle. His father's brother. Wet. He'd been crying. He had a look on his face Mikey had never seen on a grown man. Tom said, "Mikey, son, you gotta come with me." Mikey said, "Where's Dad?" Tom didn't answer. He just took his hand. Like he was 4 again. Took his hand and walked him out to the truck. They drove to the corner of Foothill and 35th. Red and blue lights everywhere. Cops. People from the neighborhood standing on the sidewalk under umbrellas, watching. And there was the bike. On its side. In the middle of the road. Chrome bent up, gas tank scraped down to bare metal. And a blue Buick up on the curb, with its front end caved in like a fist. And there, 20 feet from the bike, covered with a yellow tarp, was a shape that was his father. The drunk teenager sat on the curb with his face in his hands. 18 years old. He'd been drinking since noon. Ran the stop sign at maybe 40 miles an hour. Never saw the bike. Never hit the brakes. Mikey didn't cry. Not then. He just stood next to his uncle in the rain. He didn't have a jacket on. The rain soaked through his shirt and into his bones. Tom took off his own leather jacket, the big one with the patches, and put it around Mikey's shoulders. It went all the way to Mikey's knees. It smelled like pipe tobacco. It smelled like his father, because Tom and Hank smoked the same pipes. Tom said, "You're our boy now, Mikey. You hear me? You're our boy now. We'll take care of you. I promise." Mikey nodded. The funeral was 3 days later. The rain hadn't stopped. The whole club came. 60 men in leather. They rode in formation behind the hearse, 20 miles an hour, all the way out to the cemetery in San Leandro. People came out of their houses to watch them pass. People took off their hats. At the graveside, when the priest was done, Lobo nodded at the men. And all 60 of them got down on one knee in the mud. In the rain. Heads bowed. Mikey stood at the foot of the grave in his father's jacket. Tom had given it to him for keeps, and he watched all those men kneel in the mud for his father, and he still didn't cry. He didn't cry until a week later, when he found one of his father's reading glasses on the kitchen counter, folded next to a coffee cup nobody had washed. The week after the funeral, things were calm. Strangely calm. The club brought casseroles. Lobo moved into the spare bedroom. Smitty came by every day to check on Mikey, to bring him paperbacks. Mikey went back to school. He took the math test. Got a B+. Didn't tell anybody. Life was continuing. The rain stopped. October became November. And Mikey thought, this is what happens. You lose people, the club closes around you, you keep going. He thought that was the whole story. He thought he understood his future. He'd grow up in the clubhouse. He'd be one of them. That was the only road. He even started to feel a kind of peace about it. A boy of 12, in a too-big leather jacket, accepting his inheritance. But that's not where this story goes. That was the calm before the second thing. The thing nobody saw coming. 6 months later. April. The rains had come back and gone again. Mikey was sitting in second period English when the teacher, Mrs. Hollander, came over and tapped him on the shoulder. Michael, can I see you in the hall? Mikey followed her out. He thought he was in trouble. Mrs. Hollander closed the door. She had a manila envelope. She knelt down so she was eye level with him, a small woman, red hair going gray, and said, Michael, listen carefully. There's a school upstate, a private boarding school. They've offered you a place, a full scholarship, everything paid, books, uniforms, food. Mikey stared at her. Your uncle has been working on this since November. He came to see me the week after your father's funeral. He's been writing letters. The school agreed yesterday. You start in September. Mikey said, why, Mrs. Hollander said, because your uncle thinks you should go. And I think you should go too. You're a very smart boy. You read more than any student I've ever taught. This school, you'd be with other students like you. You'd have a real chance. Mikey went home that afternoon. He didn't go to the clubhouse. He went straight home. Lobo was there making spaghetti. Mikey came in, dropped his book bag, and said, I'm not going. Lobo turned off the stove, wiped his hands on a towel, sat down at the kitchen table. Sit down, Mikey. Mikey sat down. Lobo's eyes were red. Your father and I talked about it. Years ago. When you were 7. He said, Tommy, I want my boy to have a way out. Not because there's anything wrong with the life, but because he's not gonna be a wrench man. He's not gonna be a fighter. He's gonna be a man who reads books. And the world doesn't pay men who read books unless they get the right kind of school. Your father said that to me. Word for word. Mikey said, I don't want to leave. I want to stay here. With you. With Smitty. With the guys. And Lobo, big tough Lobo, with the scar across his cheekbone and the Marine Corps tattoos, Lobo started to cry. Quietly. I know, son. But you're not staying. We're sending you. That's what your father wanted. The club voted. All 60 men. Unanimous. You're going. You're gonna become someone he'd be proud of. And then someday, when you're a grown man, you can decide what you want to do with all of it. Right now, you're 12 and we're the grown-ups, and this is the call we're making. Mikey didn't argue. He couldn't argue. He sat there and he looked at his uncle and he understood, for the first time, what his father had meant about being honest about who you are. He understood that his father had been honest about him, that his father had seen him clearly since the very beginning, that his father had known he wasn't going to be a wrench man, and his father had loved him anyway, and his father had quietly been building him a road out. In September, Mikey went to that school. Lobo drove him up in the truck. 5 hours through the foothills. Mikey wore khakis and a blue blazer that didn't fit right. His suitcase had his father's leather jacket folded inside, wrapped in newspaper. He kept it under his bed for 4 years, and he never wore it. He didn't want to ruin the smell of the pipe. Now let me jump ahead, because the long part of the story is the part where life happens. And life happened to Mikey the way it happens to most of us. Slow, mostly quiet, with some hard parts and some good parts, and a lot of regular parts in between. He graduated, went to college on another scholarship, Pomona, down south. English literature. He read Steinbeck on his own in the library late at night, and every time he opened one of those books he heard his father's voice. Graduated with honors. Got a teaching credential. He came back to the Bay Area, but not Oakland. Took a job in San Mateo. High school English teacher. 10th grade. He taught Steinbeck. Every year. He made his students read Of Mice and Men out loud slow, the way his father had read it to him. Plain. No decoration. He got married to a librarian named Sarah, a quiet woman with a small laugh, when he was 34. They had a daughter, Hannah. He was a good husband, a gentle father. Never raised his hand. Never raised his voice. Just like Hank. But here's what I have to tell you. He never went back. Not to the clubhouse. Not in all those years. Lobo came to the wedding. Smitty came to Hannah's christening with a stuffed bear in his giant scarred hand. A handful of the others came to important things when they were invited. But Mike, he went by Mike now, Mike didn't go to them. He sent Christmas cards. He sent birthday cards. When men died, he sent flowers. But he didn't put on a leather jacket and ride into Oakland. He didn't even own a leather jacket. He drove a Honda Accord. Drove it for 20 years. And inside, in a part of himself, he didn't show anybody, including Sarah, he hurt. Not bitter. Not angry. Just a quiet hurt. Because he missed his father every day, and because he sometimes felt like he had betrayed the men who raised him. Like he had taken the road they built and walked it so far he couldn't see them anymore. Like he had become a soft kind of man, a school man, and they wouldn't recognize him. And he didn't want to find out. So he stayed away. That was Mike Doyle for 46 years. A high school English teacher in San Mateo, with a quiet wife, a grown daughter, and a leather jacket folded in newspaper in a box at the top of a closet that he hadn't opened since he was 16 years old. Then 3 months ago, he's 58 now, the phone rang in his kitchen on a Sunday morning. A number he didn't know. He answered. A voice on the other end said, "Mikey." Just hearing that name, Mikey, in a low, gravelly, half-broken voice Mike knew. The man said, "It's Smitty." "Mikey, your uncle's gone. Lobo passed last night. The funeral's Saturday. Mikey, you gotta come home." Mike said yes before he thought about it. "I'll be there, Smitty. I'll be there Saturday." He hung up. Stood in the kitchen for a long time. Sarah came down the stairs and saw his face and didn't ask. She put on water for tea and stood next to him at the counter while it heated up. Saturday morning, Mike drove to Oakland by himself. Sarah offered to come. He said no, because he needed to do this part the way he had left it. Alone. In the same direction. He drove the Accord. Wore a black suit. In the back seat on a hanger was his father's leather jacket. He hadn't taken it out of the newspaper since 1983. He didn't know if it would fit. The funeral was at the same cemetery. San Leandro. Same chapel. Same view of the hills. Mike parked. He sat in the car for a minute. Through the windshield he could see them, 50, 60 men in leather standing around the entrance. Older now. Bellies. Gray beards. Some in wheelchairs. Smitty was there, by the door, in a wheelchair, oxygen tube under his nose. The glass eye still the same. Mike got out. He walked across the gravel. Smitty saw him first. Smitty's face went all the way open, joy and grief mixed together, and he pushed himself up out of that wheelchair, oxygen tube and all, and wrapped Mike in a hug that smelled like pipe tobacco and Old Spice and a long, long life. Smitty said in that gravel voice, "There's our boy. There's our boy. Welcome home, Mikey." The other men came over. One by one. They didn't say much. Most just put a hand on his shoulder, looked at him and nodded. One of the younger ones, a man in his 40s Mike didn't recognize, said, "Sir, I just want you to know. Your father's name. Patch Doyle. We say it every time we vote. 60 years now. We say Patch Doyle watch over us. He's still with us, sir." Mike couldn't speak. He just nodded. After the burial, after they put Lobo in the ground next to Hank, where the plot had been waiting for 46 years, Smitty rolled up beside Mike and said, "Son, will you come back to the house? The clubhouse. There's something we need to show you. Something we've been keeping for you. For a long time." Mike said yes. He drove behind the funeral procession. 20 miles an hour. Just like in 1979. All the way back to East 14th. All the way back to that low brick building with the steel door. The hand-painted sign was different. The paint had been redone. But it was the same building. He hadn't walked through that door since the spring of 1980. He walked through it now. 58 years old. In a black suit. With his father's jacket on a hanger over his arm. The clubhouse was bigger than he remembered. Or he was smaller. Time does that. But the pool table was in the same place. The jukebox was in the same place. The green couch was gone, replaced by a leather sectional, but the corner where the couch had been by the jukebox, that corner was the same. He could see the indent in the wood floor where the couch leg had been. Smitty rolled him to the back. To a room Mike had never been in as a kid. A small room with a steel cabinet against the wall. The cabinet was the kind you see in a body shop, gray, heavy, double-doored. Smitty had a key on a chain around his neck. Smitty handed the key to Mike. Smitty said, "Open it, Mikey. It's yours. It's been yours since November of '79. Mike unlocked the cabinet. He opened the doors. Inside, folded, hung, stacked, preserved, was every single thing that had belonged to Hank Patch Doyle. His vest with all the patches. His road captain rocker. His leather chaps. His helmet. His gloves. His pipe. A small bag with his pocket knife in it. A wristwatch. And on the bottom shelf in 2 neat stacks, his books. Mike's father's books. The Steinbeck. The Spilling. The Leonard. The 2 Hemingways. The little book of Frost poems Mike hadn't even known his father owned. Mike stood in front of that cabinet for a long, long time. Smitty didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. The other men had come into the room behind them, quietly, and they stood in a half circle, hats off, watching. Smitty finally said, "We had a vote, Mikey. Last week. The whole charter. About what to do with all of this when Lobo passed. He'd been keeping it safe all these years. Coming in every Sunday, checking it. oiling the leather, wiping the books, every Sunday for 46 years. We took the vote on Wednesday. It was unanimous. Everything in this cabinet is yours, son. And there's one more thing. We voted to give you your father's road name. If you want it, you don't have to ride. You don't have to wear the patch. You don't have to do a thing. But the name is yours. Patch. You're Patch Doyle now if you'll take it. We don't have a patch right now. We haven't had one since '79. We've been waiting on you. Mike couldn't talk. He reached into the cabinet. He took out his father's vest. The leather was soft. The patches were faded but intact. He held it up. He looked at it. He turned it around. The big patch on the back, Oakland, was perfect. 46 years of Sundays of Lobo oiling it. He put it on. Over his black suit jacket. He had to shrug it up onto his shoulders. He had been bracing for it not to fit. He had been bracing for it to be too big, the way the jacket was too big when he was 12. It fit. It fit perfectly. Like it had been waiting for him to grow into it. Like it had been measured for the man he had become, not the boy who had buried his father. Smitty was crying. All of them were crying. Mike was crying. Smitty said, "Welcome home, Patch." Mike said, and he had to clear his throat to get it out. Mike said, "It's good to be home, Smitty. Now I want to tell you the last part. The quiet part. Because the loud part, the patches, the vest, the road name, that's just the door. The quiet part is the room. After everyone had hugged him, after he had cried with them and laughed with them and told them about Sarah and Hannah and his teaching, Mike walked over to the corner where the green couch had been. By the jukebox. He stood there for a second. Then he sat down on the floor. In his suit and his father's vest, 58 years old. He sat down on the wood floor in that corner, the way a 12-year-old boy sits, knees up, back against the wall. And out of the inside pocket of his suit jacket, he took a book. A paperback. East of Eden by John Steinbeck. He had brought it with him. He didn't know, when he packed it, exactly why. He thought maybe he'd read on the drive home. But he understood now. He opened the book. He started to read. After a few minutes, one of the younger men, the one who told him about the votes, came over. He had a kid with him. A real kid. Maybe 11, 12 years old. Skinny. Glasses. A little bit shy. The man said, "Patch, this is my boy. Jacob. Jacob, this is the man we've been telling you about. This is Hank Doyle's son. Old Hank. The one with the books." Jacob said hi, real soft. Mike closed his book. Mike patted the floor next to him. Mike said, "Sit down, son. Sit down a minute. Let me tell you a story." Jacob sat. Mike said, "When I was your age, exactly your age, I used to sit right here. In this corner. And I'd read. While my dad and his brothers played pool over there." "Did you know that?" Jacob shook his head. Mike said, "My dad, he was a road captain. He thought a boy who reads was exactly his son. He used to read me Steinbeck." "You ever read Steinbeck, Jacob?" Jacob shook his head. Mike said, "I'll send you one. We'll start with the short one. Of Mice and Men, you read it. Then you tell me what you think." "Deal," Jacob nodded. Slowly. Mike said, "There was a Tuesday when I was your age. A Tuesday in October. It was raining. Listen to this, Jacob." And Mike told him. The whole thing. The bookstore. The math test. The Buick. The yellow tarp in the road. The funeral. The men in the mud. The jacket that smelled like pipe tobacco. Tom Lobo's hand on his shoulder. The boarding school. The 46 years. He told the kid all of it. Quiet. Plain. No decoration. The way his father had taught him. Outside somewhere, somebody was starting a bike up. That deep rumble. Then another. Then another. The men were getting ready to go ride for Lobo, the way they had ridden for Hank. They'd be gone in a minute. The clubhouse would be empty, except for Mike and Jacob in the corner. Mike said, "You know what my father told me, Jacob? He said, you don't have to be like me. You just have to be honest about who you are." I didn't understand it when he said it. I was 12. I'm 58 now. I think I'm finally starting to understand it. He looked at the kid. The kid was looking up at him, all eyes, all attention. Mike said, "I've been a teacher my whole life, son. I never rode a bike. I never wore this vest until today. And I thought for a long time, I thought that I had let my father down, that I had walked away. But sitting here in this corner with you, I see it now. I was a Doyle the whole time. I was his boy the whole time. I just had to grow old enough to come back and see it. You hear me, Jacob?" Jacob nodded. The bikes outside were rumbling. The whole building was vibrating with it. The same sound Mike had heard the morning his father drove off to the bookstore alone. The same sound exactly. 46 years later. In a different decade, in a different century with different men, but the same sound. Some sounds don't change. Some sounds are just the world keeping its promise. Mike looked toward the door. Through the door he could see the men in the rain because it had started to rain again, soft, the way it does in October in Oakland in the rain on their bikes, ready to ride. He could see Smitty in a sidecar, oxygen tank strapped beside him, helmet on, waiting. Mike stood up. He helped Jacob up. He put his hand on the kid's shoulder, the way Lobo had put his hand on Mike's shoulder in the rain in 1979 on that wet street, and he said, "Come on, son. Let's go watch them ride. Then I'll come back and finish this book. And you'll come back too. Okay? Anytime you want. This corner's yours too. You hear me? This is your corner now." Jacob said, "Yes, sir." They walked outside. Into the rain. Into the same rain. Mike standing in his father's vest, and a small bookish boy standing next to him in glasses that kept sliding down his nose. The men kicked their bikes into gear. The sound rolled down East 14th like thunder. And Mike Doyle, who used to be Mikey, who is now Patch, Mike put his hand on Jacob's shoulder and stood very still and watched them go. He didn't have to ride to belong. He just had to come home. And he had. He finally had. 46 years late in the rain, with a paperback in his pocket and his father's vest on his back, in the corner where he had always been. Where he had always been all along. That's the whole thing. A boy stood in the rain in 1979 and watched his father fall. And 46 years later, a man stood in the rain and watched the same brothers ride away and understood that nothing had ever really been taken from him. It had only been kept safe, in a steel cabinet, by men in leather. Through 46 Octobers and one long, quiet life of teaching 10th graders to read Steinbeck out loud, plain, no decoration. The way his father had taught him. The way he was teaching one more boy now. In a corner by a jukebox in Oakland. In the rain.